Alright, this is section 2 on drawing the eye with Francis Vallejo, and we are going to get into the anatomy of the eye. Okay, so the eye is a sphere. Not a flat shape like that. Now that's a good symbol, and we're going to talk about how this is important later on, but right now we need to think of the eye as a sphere like this. Now the thing is, as this sits in the head, we only see perhaps a section like that. So all this is actually sitting in the eye socket. But it always is important that when we're drawing a shape on the eye like this, it actually follows that curve. Okay, so the eye is made up of the actual visible part of the eye that we see. We have a top lid, then we have a bottom lid, and then we have it goes into the brow, which isn't technically part of the eye, but it's part of the eye cavity. So we have a brow which has parts of the eyebrow, and then we have how it transitions into the nose. Okay, but the main thing to think about is the actual visible part of the eye, and how does that interact with the top eyelid and the bottom eyelid. Let's look at it from a different view. So here we have the eyeball again, and then we have the cornea, a little reflection. Okay, so the top lid is going to go like that, and we have that sitting in a socket like that, the brow, eyelashes, okay, and then we have the bottom lid, a few more eyelashes. Okay, so what's important about this? One of the main things, and we're going to talk about this a lot more later with lighting, is that we see here the space from here to here, so the actual eyeball to where the lid is, it's not flush. It is not like this, right? There's actually some meat. There's some thickness between where the front of the eyelid is and the eye. Why is that? Because it has to roll over the eye, right? It has to go over it, so there needs to be a little negative space for it to do that. Also, the bottom lid, same thing. It's not completely flush with the eye. There's a little meat there. Very important, especially when drawing it from the side. Okay, so how can we apply that to then when we see the eye from the front? Well, that means in a lot of circumstances we can actually see the bottom plane, which is right here, of the top lid, and the top plane of the bottom lid. Okay, does that make sense? So that these lids actually have planes. There's some thickness to them. So let me do an example to show you how that might look. So here's the eye at a bit of a 3/4. Okay, so I suppose if there were eyelashes, something like that. Okay, so here's the eye, and then if the nose would be going here. So in certain angles, we're going to see different planes. So right here, we fill this in. And just for the sake of identifying it, here's that plane right here. So, do we start to see how there's mass happening here, how these actual eyelids can be thought of almost as cubes, right? Now, of course, they're curvilinear shapes and they're wrapping around an eyeball, but if you think of them as having a dimension like a cube, right, like this, and there's actual mass to it, that if you think of the lids as that wrapping around the eye, all of a sudden it changes the way you look at the eye, right? It appears like there's these separate elements of thickness to it, and all of a sudden it starts to have some form. So what happens if we look at this from another angle, perhaps from an angle looking up? So we're looking up at the eye right here. So that's going to look like, let's see, so we have the bottom lid here, suggestion of a plane change. Okay, here we have the bottom plane of the top of the lid. Here we have the actual top lid itself. And we have the bottom plane then of the brow. So we're starting to get a lot of different planes here, right? So it's helpful to think about that. So bottom plane here, right? The upper lid. And then here's the front plane right here of the top lid. Here's the bottom plane of the brow. And here's the front plane of the brow, and then we can start putting in the eyebrow a little like that. And then turn this around a little there. And we can make this much more complicated if we wanted. So you can see, so it's almost like this step ladder, right? It's almost like stairs. There's these different planes. There's the front plane, the bottom plane. Very important to think about. Okay, so let's move on. So one of the best ways to study eyes, I highly recommend it, is Bargue. Charles Bargue is an artist from the 1800s, and he created a system of drawing, particularly from casts, and he really simplified things down a bit. So let's look at the eyes from different angles and ways to simplify them. So let's look at it from the side. And I'm going to draw in some very simple planes to help identify it. So here's a vertical plane. Here's a cross section. And we're going to draw a few of these cross sections. And what I'm drawing now are variations of the slides from the 1800s from Bargue. If you Google them, you could find them for yourselves. And probably one of the best things I promise you that you could do is copy these slides over and over and over, and your understanding of the eye is going to improve radically. So the eye from the side, very simple but very helpful. So let's get the eye from a bit more of a 3/4, a little more extreme view. So we have the top eyelid, and we have the plane of the eye sitting in the lid right there, right? That little meat helps out a lot. Tear duct. That's the little area on the inside of the eye as it terminates into the nose. You have that little tear duct, and it's important to put that in. So if you don't, it's going to look like something is missing from the eye. Okay, there's another view. Let's see. Let's have a pretty much straight on image. So you notice as I put down my marks, I'm thinking a bit geometrically. I'm thinking about the planes. And this is the way you need to think at the beginning, because as we move on and get into lighting, you're going to see how that understanding of planes is going to help you light an eye. And then eventually you're going to do this automatically, and you perhaps might not have to think about it too much. You'll be able to memorize it. So let's do one more. Let's have more of a down 3/4 angle, a little trickier. So that would be you wouldn't see that much of the actual eyeball or something like that. So let's review. If you want to continue to work on this lessons, what should you do? Remember, the eye is a sphere. It sits in the eye socket. You're only seeing part of the eye. The rest of the eye is sitting behind, like that, right? So what are some of the main elements? Well, you have just a little sliver of eyeball. You have the top lid. You have the bottom lid. Also, the top lid terminates into the brow, and part of that you have the tear duct. But the main three elements are the actual eyeball, the top and bottom lid. Okay, now the top and bottom lid, right, they have planes to them. They're dimensional. They have a lot of meat to them. Understanding how those planes work and always identifying them is important. And from there, look at Bargue slides. Copy those slides, understand them, memorize them. You'll be in a great, great place, I promise you. Okay, on to the next chapter.